everyone, Karen the Warp Spinster here. Thanks for spending some time with me this morning. I want to talk about how I created paper piecing templates for this particular design, which came out of the design challenge, weekly design challenge that I did a little while ago. This one was inspired by windshield wipers on a car, and abstracted windshield wipers. Anyway, so one of the reasons that I chose paper piecing is because these are all basically the same shape. Some of them are flipped vertically, and then the size changes and the color changes, which isn't a big deal. Could I do this with regular templates? Yes, absolutely I could. I thought about doing that. I could still do that. I might do it to do a comparison. But if I did, I could do templates for this because this is an odd angle. I don't even know what that angle is. I don't want to care about what that angle is. I just want to piece it, which means that I would do a template probably with template plastic. And absolutely I could do that. I'm still going to have to break it down into the shapes that I would do. For example, I don't want to do that set-in seam if I can help it, so there's going to be a seam here somewhere. And these, of course, would be easy enough to piece. Wouldn't even have to do templates for those. But I would for these two because, you know, it's an odd angle. I decided that I wanted to do paper piecing on this because of that odd angle. And I didn't want to just keep tracing around a template and doing it. Then I'd have to change the size of the templates for all of those. So this seemed to me a good candidate for doing paper piecing, given my limited experience. I have done a fair amount of paper piecing, and I've designed a couple of templates, but I'm by no means an expert. But I wanted to do this because there really aren't a lot of lines. There aren't a lot of pieces to this, and they're all straight lines. There are no curves. It looks pretty straightforward, and I think I could do this without too much difficulty. Maybe a good start for doing paper piecing foundations. I designed this in Procreate, and I'm going to, and actually when I did the template, I did it in Procreate as well. I'm going to show it to you on Procreate because that's how I did it, and I think it will be easier for you to see the steps that I go through rather than if I were doing it on tracing paper or whatever. I will go through other methods for doing this other than Procreate because I know a lot of you don't use Procreate, but I think it's a good way to show you what I did. I've isolated this one shape just so we aren't distracted by the other things, and now I am going to draw a line around the shapes that have color to them. I have drawn lines around the shapes with color, and then I've also drawn the edges of a block. And now I need to think about how I would piece this and what are the largest pieces that I can do. I may not be able to piece this in one foundation section. I may have to do multiple sections. And looking at this, if you think about paper piecing, you are, move this over here. You're basically just doing what you would be doing with regular seaming. You just have lines to follow on paper. So you're just putting shapes right sides together and turning them. So you have to think about, all right, how can I do that without having to do a funky seam? So let's take, for example, this piece here. If I try to make this all one piece, then I have to do these. I'm insetting something, which doesn't make any sense. Can I applicate it? Absolutely. But I can easily make this doable, pieceable, foundation paper pieceable as well, by drawing lines up to the edge of the block. So now I can piece these two things together, and then I can take this piece, fold it back, this piece, fold it back. So I'm going to have to do this first as a separate piece. So that's a section all on its own. So I'm going to label that, say, section A, because I know that's got to be pieced separately and then pieced within the next section. I don't have that issue down here because that's all one piece. It goes from here up to the edge of the block. Now, I have to think about the other pieces and how they are going to go to the edges of the block, but I don't want to do that yet. I want to think about, clearly I can't do this as one section because I've got, this piece will work fine. I can just fold that back here, but then I've got this, all this angle going on. I can't do this as one piece and then flip things over on top of it. So I'm going to have to break this up as well. Okay, if I were to do this, for example, I've got another funky shaped piece here, and I've got a little tiny bit of a horizontal line before it angles off. I'm actually okay with this moving over to this corner. If I weren't, then I would need to draw another line here so that I get rid of that set in piece. I'm actually okay with that moving over, so I'm going to treat this line as meeting that. And that gives me a place then, okay, well, what if I go down to the bottom edge of the block here? Then I've got this that I can piece. So, and I'm going to break this down into sections. This needs to be extended over here. And then I can piece all of this. So this is a section. It's going to be pieced first, and then I can do that piece and flip over, this piece and flip over. And then I can add that piece onto the end of it. So here's another section here. I've got, let me think about if I could once I've finished that part of it, then I can come back and do this piece. So I could then put the blue piece on, fold it back there, then take this white piece, fold it back there, and then I have to do this little corner over here and this little corner over here. So I could also do this as two separate sections so that this becomes B, and so this is A, it's the first one I'm going to piece. Then I build on that to do B, and then I could just make that a separate section, call that done, and then do a separate section that has this blue piece starting out, then white, then have a fold back on these corners to add in those angles. That's doable too. So that could be section C, or it could just be pieced as one section. Although it's sort of like two sections. All right, then I've got this piece over here, which is going to have to be a separate section. I can't, there's no way I can build on this section B and make that work. So I'm going to have to do this as a separate section. And we'll do the same thing over here. I need to go to an edge and not have, odd angles here. So I've got two choices actually. I could do this, or I could do this to take it to an edge. Doesn't matter. Remember this little joggy thing isn't actually here. I've changed that. So now I've got a piece here that I can say I start out with this, and then I take a piece of white and flip it back, another piece of white and flip it back. Actually, no, back up the truck. I would do this piece, I would do this as number 1, this as number 2, 3, and 4. So that would be the piecing order. Lay that one out, fold back this one, then do this one. Either one of these first, doesn't matter, they're interchangeable. Then fold that back and fold that back. So now I've done it in 3 sections. This one has to be pieced on its own. Then I'm building on that or just using that as another piece that flips back. I could start with B in the center here and then build out from that, put that piece on, then that piece and that piece. That's the order of that isn't important, except that A has to come first. I have to piece that first. And then I would flip this over, flip that over, do a corner over here and that corner there. So that looks to be the best option at this point. Then if I want to add in order here, then I could put in. So that's number 1 for A. That's just the way it is. So this could be, I'll probably do this as the first one and then build out that way. So this could be B2, and this section would be B3, and this would be B4. Again, you could change the order of that, but that's how I'm going to go. And then this piece goes on next, and that would be B5. And then I would logically do this one would be B6, and then this would be 7, and this one 8, or vice versa. So that section is finished. And then we go on to C here, and this would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you want to do that, to add that to your templates, absolutely. But for me, it's all about following through. All right, how would I piece this? Can I piece this? And that, I think, will do for the template. Now, if you're not using Procreate, you can do this on paper, of course. So let's talk about doing that. If you were doing it on paper, you could just use your drawing on paper and draw the edges around it. So I did the lines that surrounded the shapes that have color in them. Then I drew around the border of, or the edges of the block, or at least the paper piecing section block, and then extended the lines out to the edges so that I would have pieceable sections of it. Now in this particular one, I did not do, let's see if I can pull this back without your eye going wonkies here. Here I did this as if it were a rectangle with right angles, and so I added on this B6 piece. When I did this, I opted to not put that piece on there so that I have just this section, and that gives me a little more leeway in how I put this together in the quilt, so that I'm not necessarily doing straight up blocks. I can shift things around. So that here I could change how things were oriented and how they met up with each other here. So for example, if I had done this as a block, I'd be cutting across these legs or these pillars, and I wanted to give myself more options. So I could add it later on, for sure, if I decided that I wanted it to be more of a block shape. But for now, I opted to just not use that extra piece here. So this, in fact, ends up being my template base. I would want to divide it into sections because if I'm going to piece them as sections, I need to have seam allowance around it to join the sections. Now, before I do that, however, this is paper piecing. This is the image that I want. I want it to be in this orientation, which means because I'm going to be placing the fabric here, but sewing over here, I need my template for sewing to be from this side, so flipped. So I'm going to have to create this template on this side. This is where it's going to be drawn. Fabric is going to be over here, so this will be right. But since I'm using this side for sewing, I need my sewing lines here. So I need to trace on the back here. Now, this is pretty clear because I've used pretty bold lines here, and I still have the color showing through. I can probably see it a little better than you can. So I could probably trace this, but if yours is in black and white or colors that are harder to see through, or you've got paper that's thicker, whatever, then you can use a light box. So you can see it a little better. I could have actually done this without the light box, but you can see it better, I think, on screen. Now, if you don't have a light box, not to worry. You can put it up on a window. I would tape it up just to, keep it from sliding around too much. And then I could just use a ruler, probably a lighter weight ruler than this one, to draw those lines. So I'm just going to do these lines here. And that was not very good, actually. You will be more precise. So I will draw those lines, and then I can number them if I need that in order to know what my order is. So I've got this section for section A, then this is all going to be part B, where I have, this is section A, it becomes its own section or its own piece in the B section. So this I would probably do it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. The little corners are always, I think. Let me think about that. If it's right at the corner of a section, the corners are always going to be the last thing you piece in that section. And then on this section, which will be section C, has to be done separately. And I would probably do this as 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 and 3 don't matter in that case. And then I will just make copies of this on either, I guess I could scan it and just keep printing out copies from that scan if I have to do multiple copies of the same piece, and I will, although some of them will have to be flipped, so I need to take that into account. Here is the template, my final template that I broke into sections because I'm going to be piecing them separately, so they need to be separate templates. So here's the first one, which is just this little leg here. And then the second one, this is the blue part of it. And these are the 2 legs or posts. And then this is the final section. This is the blue, and all of the rest are white. That's the final iteration of this now that I have it in sections and it's reversed, so that I'm going to be sewing on this side, but the fabric will be on that side, and we'll finish correctly. And here is my finished piece. I did this section first and then pieced this, put on the blue, folded back, did the corner, then I did this separate section, and then I sewed them together. And I was careful to make sure that these matched up. I will note that if you are making essentially photocopies of a print copy, so say you print out your first pattern, and then you're just going to be using your multifunction printer or whatever, and essentially photocopying it, always save your master. Just keep it as your master, and then always make your copies from that. If you make copies of copies of copies, then it's going to start changing size. So if you need those to be all of them to be the same size, then make sure that you are copied from a master, not from a copy. We'll see how this goes. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm actually going to have to do several templates, of course, because these two are the same size, but that one's a little smaller. That one's a little smaller. That one, I don't know. But once I have my template in the largest size, then I can just put it on my multi-function printer copier thing and reduce the size. And the templates will still work the same way. I don't have to reconfigure the templates, redraw them. I just have to change the size and, of course, the color. That's it for my paper piecing foundation creation crash course for myself. I hope it was helpful for you as well. If you have questions, please put them in the discussion area and I'll do my best to answer them. There may be greater experts than I who will be able to answer them as well. If you are more experienced with this and have tips or ideas, or you see something I've left out, please also indicate that in the discussion. I will note that you can also do paper piecing patterns in EQ, electric quilt. And I do have EQ, and I have, in fact, done paper piecing patterns from there. Not often, I will admit, but it makes it relatively easy to do it. You still have options for how you number the order in which you do it. But if you have EQ and haven't tried that yet, then give that a try. It would be when you go to print the file, you have your choices for whether you want templates, rotary cutting, etc. Foundation piecing is one of your choices, and you could just, I would preview it, see what it does, and then it lets you change the numbering within that preview for printing. That much I do remember. If there's interest in that, I could do Sunday Sundries on using that in EQ, for those of you who have EQ. Thank you for joining me today. I don't know what I'm going to be doing on Wednesday or next Sunday. We'll see what happens between now and then. Hope to see you then. In the meantime, of course, be well, be happy, be piecing. Peace out. And you probably aren't going to care about this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. It's a matter of pride. If you watched my circles demonstration, you will know that I lost, I thought, forever. A sample that I was going to use had the needle and the thread in it, and I could not find it on my table to save my soul. And the reason I couldn't find it is because it was between books in the bookcase that's behind me. You don't need to know the particulars for how it got there. I know it got there, but I just want to point out that I did eventually find it. It was just kind of organized in my books. Peace out.